Excellent. Welcome to everyone to our Online Mastermind Investment Strategies Q&A with the phenomenal Katie McDonald from Private Wealth Architects. And I just want to do a quick acknowledgement of country. We get people coming in from all around the world. I live in Boorloo in Perth. So I live in the land of Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and just want to pay our respects to all of our Indigenous elders, past, present, and emerging. And my name's Leanne. I'm the coordinator for Business Women Australia. If you have any questions, please let me know and reach out. And we like to work with people to co-create your success. So we have a collection of collective, not a collection of women, sorry, across Australia. And we do try to foster success and personal growth between everyone that we reach out to. And if you'd like to be a part of the community, please let me know. And it's quite a diverse community as well. Owners, entrepreneurs, directors, managers, C-suites, consultants, emerging leaders. We work with everyone, and we like to, these are our 5 main areas of development. And of course, we have some very wonderful and amazing shared values. Everyone that we share our BWA journey with, we open up our arms. We love inclusion, diversity. It does take a lot of courage to join, especially when you don't know anyone. We love a great collaboration, but always keep your mind open and enjoy your ride with everyone. And there are fantastic benefits. So for our classic connectors, you get 2 planning check-ins twice a year. And if you're a premium leader, you've got 4 strategy sessions, obviously discounted events, BWA listing. I could rattle it off, but if you'd like to know more, please contact me. As a classic, it's $550 a year, and premium leaders are $4,400, and those are inclusive of GST. We do have events around the country. Coming up tomorrow night, if you're in Perth, join me. We've got a spring dinner with our fabulous 3 Drops wine, courtesy of Joanne Bradbury. We have another mastermind coming up this week for Wellbeing for Leaders with Pink Health. And it's our 9th birthday on the 25th of September. So we have an online courageous conversation where age is just a number. I keep telling myself that every year after I turned 40. And we have a career transition workshop with the phenomenal Joe Robin. And then back in Perth, we've got our Chats, Cheese and Wine again with Vita Carlino, and an online masterclass with Lynn for our nimble goal setting for action, and a long lunch ending Perth with the Worldwide Adventures of the Mind. So please follow and connect. And I'm going to stop talking because everybody likes it when I stop talking, and we love to hear Katie talk a lot more. So over to you, Katie.
Hi, Leanne and ladies. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. We actually thought we would try an evening event rather than do a lunch and learn or an in-person event or an evening in-person event, just to see whether or not this made it easier for everybody from a timing point of view. Personally, I had to rush home from the office and eat a banana before starting. And I know Leanne was basically feeding her kids just as we were jumping online to do some sound testing. So I absolutely am so grateful that you guys have managed to carve out a bit of time this evening. I love what I do. You know, I started investing, for those of you who don't know me, when I was 21. I purchased my first investment property with my boyfriend and brother at the time. And it was an amazing roller coaster ride because, first of all, we had to go to literally a bank's office and present our case on borrowing money. These days, you probably don't even meet your mortgage broker. Then we went to auction. So this was in Sydney, and that was just so terrifying. I had my dad there, and he actually ended up doing the bidding because we just didn't have any idea. And when we got the house, we moved in and went, oh, wow, here we are. I didn't mention to my, team of house owners that my plan was to renovate and sell the house. So that was a huge shock to them. And from there, we've done lots of different things. I just realized that I'm just chatting and I don't have my screen shared, but that's okay because I can do that at the same time. You know, I from there, we renovated that house for 18 months, and we were all working and doing it on the weekend. We had help from friends. We were reading books at night on how to do knock down walls and all of these different things, because while I know age is not a number, I definitely don't look like I was around before Google, but I was. And so we got to the 18 months mark. We had a real estate agent that lived on the street. We actually paid his father-in-law to come over from New Zealand, live with them, and do our second area. And so it was a contra deal where we paid for his flights in return for him doing some work on our house. So it was very, very creative in the way that we managed to do this property. Long and the short of it is we sold it for 3 times our combined income. And it was just absolutely amazing. We couldn't believe it. Granted, let's be serious, we weren't on very big incomes because we were 21. Thankfully, that boyfriend became my husband. We got on this huge bandwagon of properties and developments and selling and buying and renting. I had 2 kids close together, 14 months apart. And that's when everything sort of shifted for me because, again, definitely not that old, but daycare didn't have any discounts then, and I had 2 kids under 2. You didn't really have flexible work unless you wanted to do, I don't know, like working McDonald's and stuff like that. Like normal careers didn't allow you or didn't have options for you to be flexible. So I ended up going, well, what are we going to do? We've got all these properties. I need to make an income. So I decided to take myself off to learn how to trade the market. I was one of very few women in those seminars. I went to so many different seminars and random things and events, and I was just on a mission to learn how I can earn some money without having to put my kids in daycare full time and really not make much money after that. So that was like very cool. And one of the reasons it is because I wasn't scared to ask questions. And what that meant is that in these seminars, that some of them went for 2 days, so they were long, in-depth education things. I could ask a million questions, and I really ended up getting a lot out of those investment seminars, whereas most men didn't ask any questions in those events. So I came home, I put it to action. Then people started asking me questions. How are you doing this? How come you can do this? This sounds amazing. And I was like, oh, wow, cool. Come over to my house. I'll show you what I'm doing, and spent a lot of time with women teaching them how to do it. And not one single person took on my advice. And I was like, what's this all about? How come nobody's listening to me? And it turns out, and Leanne, I'm sure you'll agree, I'm a pretty direct person. I don't beat around the bush. And so I realized that the way I was presenting these things to people, it just was that they were thinking, Katie's just too intense and I'm not this intense, so there's no way I could possibly do it. So I took myself off to do a coaching Cert 4, learn how to actually speak to different people other than myself. Sorry, I'm just laughing because it seems so ridiculous, but it's true. And then decided to start educating women on how investing works. And that was totally the whole thing. I won't go into too much details because I know I can talk forever. But basically, in the end, that was a fantastic business. Absolutely loved it. We traveled a lot with my husband's work, and I made a decision that I didn't want to just educate it. I wanted to hold women's hands. And so I decided to do every single bit of qualifications you can possibly imagine to become a financial advisor. And now what I do is I love it. I've done it for a really long time, and I just advise families, businesses, and women on how to build the life they want. And then I also do these workshops. So I run things like this with BWA, which absolutely love working with BWA. Lynn and Leanne are amazing women, and I've known them since I moved to Perth 10 years ago. I just also run them myself. I also run them with different offices. So I do a lot of work, lunch and learns face-to-face in office environments, just with the sole aim of just educating as much as possible about finances, because we were just never taught it. So enough about me. Let's jump into things and get cracking. Now you can definitely see my screen, can't you? Cool. Okay, so this is just to prove that I did do those renovations. This is me concentrating on hammering, and that's beautiful me when I was 21 years old. Then I've got my boys up the top there. This was the last time they were smaller than me. They're now 20 and 21. I know I don't look that old. They're now 20 and 21. They're 6'4" or 5 or something like that. And I look like a midget. So I keep that to remind myself that I was taller than them at some stage. And this was the original house that we bought when I was 21. My husband, I think, was I don't know, 23, and my brother was 19 or something like that. So it was a pretty cool process that we went through. This is a disclaimer that basically says I do not know anybody on this call. And so anything I say is not personal advice. It's just general advice. You can't if you do anything I say and it doesn't work out, that's not what the intention of this is about. So this is purely an education process where I'm just giving you some information and you're listening and learning from it. So don't sue me, okay? Not a big fan. Okay. What are we going to talk about? So we're going to talk about tapping into your inner strength and intelligence. One of my favorite parts of the presentation. I've cut out one thing because I really want to get into super and shares and property. So that's really going to be the core of it. But I think you can't jump straight into there unless you actually talk about goals and how that ties into which investment you want to use. And then there's going to be questions. But listen, Leanne, if there's any particular question that comes across that you think would be a good idea to interrupt, please go for it. I'm more than happy to answer questions along the way because I don't know, talking for an hour and a half seems like a pretty long time. Also, there's going to be 2 breakout rooms. We might end up just doing, a breakout room with everybody in one room. I'll leave that up to Leanne. She's pretty good at these things. Ask questions along the way. So here are some stats. Single women are 3% more likely than single men to own their own home. 46% of women with a home own it outright in comparison to 31% of men. Our results in both high school and university outstrip men by more than 3%. And we know this, like these are things that's definitely something we get the gist of. We are better at spotting bargains, at budgeting and running the household finances. And women, actually, this is probably one of the most important statistic out there, I think, because it really goes against the grain of women not being good at running the share market and finance, is women outperform their male counterparts by 0.4 Now, that may not sound like a lot, but it is. It's significant when investing in the share market. Now, this was a Fidelity, whatever you call it. I've lost the word. Anyway, Fidelity ran this over 10 years. So it was basically an accumulation of 10 years of comparing women's results to male counterparts. And so it was a very, very robust outcome. And I think there is a couple of reasons behind that. One of them is we're not afraid to ask good questions and do our homework, and we're risk adverse. And what that means to me is that I'm never going to sit at the pub and have a chat, and a mate of a mate knows somebody who's just about to launch an IPO. And I reckon you should go all in, mate, because lithium is the next hot thing, and let's just put all your money in this company. He's a really great guy. We're not going to do that. We're going to do our homework, and we're going to think about the impact of taking something like that and putting all our money on it. So that really lends itself to the rest of the presentation, and hopefully gives you guys a lot of confidence and clarity that this is something we definitely can do. Since 2005, there are more single women than married, and that's due to choice, divorce, and unfortunately death. We live longer, so there's always going to be that thing. However, our average super balance, and listen, these statistics are quite wobbly because every statistic I read is different, but the one I've got here is women's super balance at retirement is 42% less than our male counterparts. And on average, graduated women, when they first come out of university, are paid 4.8% less than men for the same job. Now, this one here, this is a really interesting stat because, one, I've got two boys at uni at the moment, but two, as a director of a business, I've hired a lot of people out of uni, and the difference is quite extraordinary. So when a man comes for an interview, they want the top job. They are comfortable with saying how much they want, and it's generally higher than what you plan to pay them. They're very savvy about the type of work environment they want to work in. And if you have the woman coming out of university, they're definitely confident. So it's not, they're confident in the interview. So it's not they're worried about the interview, but they don't talk money. They don't ask for more. And I can give a particular example where this guy we wanted to hire, we offered him a certain amount, and he went home and then he came back and said, actually, I want more. And we were like, oh, no, listen, that's too much. What about if we put some money towards education? And he just said, I've done enough education for a while. I would prefer to be paid more. And that's something that I think it's really important for us. I'm not sure who's in the audience, but if you're mothers, if you've got daughters, if you've got I know nieces, to really talk about negotiating and asking for more. Get them interested in investing early and understanding the benefits of being paid the right amount, because it's not an unconscious bias. It's actually just that they're going in and negotiating their pay. So now where do we go? So we understand we can do it. So let's move on from that university rant, because I sometimes get a bit sidetracked. We can do it. So now what do we want to do? So the first thing we want to do is we want to set some goals. There is there's no point in just starting investing. I've got 10 grand. Should I put it in exchange traded funds, or should I, put it on my mortgage? You really need to know what your goals are in order to ensure that you go in the right direction, because that will be the ultimate decision on where you should put your money. And so where I like to take my clients is goals first, which is what do you want to do? When do you want to do it? And how much will it cost? So it's really straightforward. It's things like, going on holidays, paying down my mortgage, sending my kids to private school, all of those different goals. There gets a time in your life where you know those things are going to happen. You're going to be debt free at some stage. You know, you can go on holidays whenever you like, not whenever you want, but you know that you can do those things. And that's when you start to think about, I suppose, that next level, which is your purpose and why do I exist? What makes me happy? What gets me out of bed in the morning? Why am I working so hard? And do I like what I am doing? So I love working with clients when they're younger, so we can get them into a headspace where we know the goals are going to happen. So we know the things they want to achieve are going to be achieved. And then we can start really planning for, I don't actually like what I do, so I wouldn't mind going back to school. So how can I work 4 days and go to school and do something else so that I can actually start thinking about what really makes me happy? And then the last part is legacy. Who do you want to help? Who is important in your life, and what do you want to be remembered for? So I think about this a lot. For me, I mean, my purpose, I love what I do, and so I'm pretty damn lucky that I can do what I love day in and day out. And I feel with a legacy thing, it's obviously definitely about my family and making sure that I'm leaving something for them, but it's also about this kind of stuff. I really want to help women become better at their finances, and I'm hoping that that shines through tonight and shines through in all my other things, and so that that's something that I can be remembered for, that I've helped others to become, create the life that they want. And so you've got to think about those things for yourself. You've got to think about, okay, so I've got this 10 grand, or I've got whatever it is, or I've got a pay rise. What do I actually want? And then how can I get it? So one of the goals I have, all my clients have, is retirement. And so I'm just going to give an example of this so that we can understand how to unpack working out what you do in order to create, get the goal you want. So for retirement, when you Google it, how much do I need in retirement? I think it says something like, for a couple, you need, for a comfortable standard of living, it's something like $54,000 or $65,000. It's not something I would classify as comfortable. And for a single person, it's around $42,000. And so when I think about that, I go, well, most of my clients wouldn't find that comfortable, so that's not going to work. So this is something I came up with to help people just understand what would be comfortable for them. So if you look at your net income, so that's after tax, and then if you have a partner, you think about their net income. And then what you want to do is think about your annual debt repayments, because the idea is that you want to be debt-free in retirement. So we are assuming that by the time you are retired, you've paid off your debt. So then you add your two incomes together, you minus the debt, and that gives you your comfortable standard of living. This is very easy. It's not complicated. A lot of people say to me, oh, but, I'm paying for school fees, or, I've got 2 kids, so therefore you would take them out because, they won't be eating at home, and all of those things. Why not aim high? So let's just include the school fees and the kids and everything like that. And plus, I don't want to make it complicated for anybody. If you're not paying school fees, maybe you go on more holidays. That's the way I would look at it. If your kids eat a lot of food, and then so they're not going to eat as much, then maybe you can go out for dinner more. So this is a really raw way of working out how much you need in retirement. So then what do you do? Well, the rule of thumb for me is 5%. And so therefore, for $1 million, so for $50,000, you would need $1 million of investable assets to create $50,000 worth of income. So in this case, you would need $2.5 million in order to create $130,000. Now, a lot of people say to me then, Wow, that's a lot, and I'm starting nowhere near that. And so what we need to take into consideration is the power of compounding. So when you're younger, putting money into super or putting money onto an investment or buying an investment property, etc., in those beginning years, you're not going to see much growth. But over time, as the compounding effects take place, that will ramp up. So I'll see somebody at 50 who will have, say, $500,000 combined in super. And by the time they're 67, they'll be closer to 2 million. So it's quite an extraordinary acceleration, but you've got to start. So that's sort of like one goal, but there's thousands of goals, and you really just need to work through which ones are important, what do I want to achieve, and then nut through the numbers. But we're going to actually do a bit of a breakout. So Leanne's going to put you out into a room. And what I want you to talk about is the importance of women and financial education, and what steps you've taken or have or are going to take or could take to discuss money and finances with your family, and especially other women in your life. So I'll pass it over to you, Leanne, to organise that.
Okay, so the breakout rooms are going to be in groups of 3. And just so everybody knows, the breakout rooms are 100% not recorded. So anything that you share afterwards will go into recording, like I said before, but we'll have 2 groups of 3. How long have we got for the breakout rooms, Kate? Is it 10 minutes? Do we need 6 minutes?
Yeah, it doesn't need to be that long. I mean, it's just really making sure everybody's actually going to think of solutions and talk to women they know about being a little bit more financially educated.
All right, let's create these rooms. So yeah, 6 minutes, and I'll have everyone back in here for the discussion. And like I said, the recording will not be active while everyone's in a breakout room. Everyone's back to you.
Okay, so listen, I suppose I wouldn't mind just getting a couple of tips and ideas. In our room, we talked about becoming more confident in investing yourselves, and then you'd be able to have better conversations with other women in your life. What did the other group have any insights or things that they might want to do to ensure that women become better at get more financial literacy and getting better at investing? Nobody wants to share their conversation? That's okay. Oh, someone.
I'll say something. Actually, I'm probably dobbing Ingrid in. Ingrid mentioned that there was that she used to go online on YouTube videos and different platforms, classrooms, where you can actually learn to negotiate. I thought that was very interesting because I didn't actually know about that.
Yep.
So that's a very good tip, I think.
Yeah, and then that's a really good way to even tell your kids and your nieces and other friends, listen, I watched this YouTube on negotiation. Maybe you should have a look at it, and then you might be able to get paid more. So good idea. That's great. Anybody else? Okay, now we're up to the good stuff now, guys. So we're going to actually talk about, let me just see where my mouse is. I share my screen. Okay, so we're going to talk, I don't have any wine with me tonight, but we're going to talk about super, the fundamentals of shares, and identifying the rewards of property investing. I think for me, I look at the different investments based on what I want to achieve or what my clients want to achieve. So I'll go into that when I talk about shares and property, but the first one is one of my favorite don't worry about that slide. I forgot to remove that slide. My favorite topics, which is this super, because a lot of people, because the government's made it so complicated, a lot of people aren't sure about it. So I want to give some information. So when you're working, it's called accumulation. What that means is any income earned inside super is only taxed at 15%, and any capital gains held over 1 year is taxed at 10%. When you're not working, it's called pension. And your income is taxed at 0%, and so is capital gains, as long as you have less than $1.9 million. And that's per person. So if you have a partner, that partner can have up to $1.9 million as well. And that will not be taxed at all when you retire. And you can retire from age 60. But from age 65, if you're still working, you can roll your money into pension and have no tax on it. So that's the first thing, and that's one of the main reasons I love it. If you think about that outside super, if you make any income from any investments, and the lady I was speaking to has some shares, any income from that will go onto your tax return, and you'll be taxed at your marginal tax bracket. So that's up to 47 cents in the dollar that the government will get. And how capital gains work is, if you held an asset over a year, is that say you made $100,000 and you held that asset, you sold the asset and made $100,000 capital gain. 50% of that goes in your pocket, and then the other 50%, so $50,000, goes on your taxable income, and it's taxed at whatever that pushes you up to in your marginal tax bracket. So it's quite a lot different than in comparison to the tax you pay in super. And the reason for that is they really do want you to put money into super. They don't want you to not put money into super, so they're making it enticing. Also, you can't touch it till you're 60 or 65. And so in turn, then that's why they give you these incentives. So we're going to go through, and I'm just going to move this. There. Okay, so there's concessional and non-concessional contributions. And again, these are terminologies that are used that don't really make sense to most people. So concessional is before tax. So that's your super guarantee that your employer may put in, or any salary sacrifice that your employer, that you choose to get your employer to put in. Now, anybody here that's working for a not-for-profit and has salary packaging, it's not the same thing. So salary packaging is putting money into paying off your mortgage or buying a computer or something like that. Salary sacrificing is actually putting money into super. It works the same way. So it's before tax. You put money into super, it reduces your taxable income, and we'll go into that a bit later in the slide. But they are called concessional contributions, and non-concessional contributions is putting money in after tax. Why would you do that? You may have got an inheritance, you've done this course, and you know now super is amazing, and you just want to put some more money into super. There's rules around it. You can do $130,000 a year, or you can bring forward 3 years. So do $390,000 after tax into super. And then you won't be able to do that again until another 4 years later. So there's like a little rules on how you can get money in. So that's why you sort of need to start earlier, because there's like restrictions on how to get money in. So I'm going to explain to you the benefits of salary sacrifice so you understand how it works. So the left-hand side is no salary sacrifice. And so your gross income is $100,000. Your taxable income is $100,000. Tax on that income, which is what you give to the government, is $24,967. So your take-home pay every year is $75,000. Salary sacrificing $16,500 into super, so reduces your income down to $83,500, and that's what you're taxed on. So that's how it works. It reduces your taxable income. And so then the tax on that income, instead of it being nearly $25,000, it's now only $19,000. Your take-home pay then, even though you've put $16,500 into super, your take-home pay is only around $10,000 difference. And if you spread that out over a year, it's not as great, like you're not feeling it as much. And so the benefit of putting that money into super is $5,692. So it's really a very cool thing, salary sacrificing. Because it's a tax deduction, and I think a lot of people don't realize that. And if you tell your employer, say, oh, I just want to put $50 a week into super, you probably won't feel it, and that's just going to slowly over time just build your super up to more. So one of my favorite subjects is called the super catch up. Now this legislation was brought into place in 18-19 financial year. And I think the main reason they did it is to help women get more money into super, because as you know, we take time off for having children or helping elderly parents or something like that. And we generally overall earn a little bit less. And so they put this legislation in place where you can catch up past concessional contributions that you missed out over the last 5 years. It's a rolling 5 years. So that means that each year we go on, the last year gets dropped off. So it slowly just moves up the ladder. And from financial year 22, you could put up to $27,500. And this financial year, you can put up to $30,000 into super, and you can catch up previous years. Now, there's a couple of rules. One of the main ones is you have to have $500,000, under $500,000 in super before you can, to do this. If you have more, then you can't do it. So I'm going to give you an example to show you how this works. So you've got a 19-20 year, 20-21 year, 21-22 year, 22-23 year, 24, which was last year, and this year is 25. So this particular example, these people lived overseas. This person lived overseas in the financial year 2020, and so could have put in $25,000 but didn't. Right. So it doesn't matter if you did live overseas or if you just came to Australia last year, you can still catch up previous years. They don't have that legislation in place. So they were allowed to put in $25,000 and they didn't put anything in. So that comes down and hangs out in that catch up area. In 21, they put $10,000 in. They were allowed to put $25,000 in. So they have a $15,000 catch up. In 22, they put 10 grand in again. They were allowed to put 27,500. So they have 17,500 available. And as you can see, this continues every year. And so this actually says, well, this particular person has $87,000 available to catch up as a tax deduction. Now, the rule is you have to max out the year you're in. So this financial year, this particular person would have to put in the $30,000. And then anything above that $30,000 would go into financial year 19-20 financial year and catch up any super here. So if this person, the employer put in $25,000 in, the person put an extra 5 grand in, then they put an extra 25,000. That whole 25 and 5, so $30,000 would be an additional tax deduction that would reduce your income down. So if we go back to here, you're on 100 and you've put an extra $30,000 into super. That means that your taxable income now is $70,000. So it's very cool. Now, who would do this, right? So that's all fine and dandy, Katie, but who's actually going to have $87,000 lying around? Well, you don't have to do the whole $87,000 in one hit. It's a rolling 5 years. So you've got to do this year and the 19-20 year to, otherwise it will be lost. And then it just goes on. So with my clients, we make sure we definitely max out this year, and then we make sure we max out the last year that's going to drop off next year. And you can do this over the course of the whole year. So you can drip feed it in. You can tell your employer, increase my contributions, salary sacrifice by 2 grand a month or whatever it is, right? Who else could do it? So if you're selling an investment outside super and you're going to make a capital gain, You could put money into super to reduce that income, because remember how I told you that you sell an investment property, you make $100,000, 50 of it goes in your pocket because you held it for more than 12 months. The other 50 goes on to your income. It's going to bump your income up, say from 100 to 150. You could then put some money into super to reduce it back down so you pay less tax. So that's another strategy that we use with my clients. So we hold off sometimes because we know we're going to sell something and then put a whole heap of money into super. The other thing is that you may have got an inheritance. So you could drip feed catch-ups over the next, 3 or 4 years using that cash from your inheritance. But again, it all comes back to your goals, right? So what do you want? So if you want to send your kids to private schools in 3 years, then this may not be the option for you because you can't access this to send your kids to private schools. So that's also the key. A lot of people say, so what shall I do? Where shall I put my money? And it really does come back to, what do you want to do short term, medium and long term? Because we can't put your money into super if you want to send your kids to private school or go on this massive holiday. Like there's these things so you've got to work through this. But this is a very, very fantastic strategy to use. And if we talked about how I have people come in with 500,000 combined super and we get them up to 2 million. We both put $87,000 into super, you're already bumping your super up. Now, remember when I said combined 500, because the rule is you have to have less than 500. So, that example, one could have 300, one could have 250. They're both under 500 each. Okay. So that's probably one of my most exciting strategies, that alongside of just even general salary sacrifice. How do you find out about this? So how do you find out how much you have missed out on? You go to your MyGov, you go to your tax section. So there'll be a tax where you've connected up with the ATO. You then go to super and then you go to contributions, and you should be able to find it in there. And you just keep on looking, and then there'll be this, how much money can I catch up? And you've got to check whether or not it's talking about including this year or excluding this year. Because remember, you've got to max out this financial year before you can touch any catch-ups. Does anybody have any questions on that? Because it's probably something that I could answer straight away before we go into the breakout rooms. If there's any chat questions or anything like that.
No chat questions yet.
Okay, where we're going to break out to another breakout before we talk about investment properties. And we're really going to do this quickly because one of the things I find interesting is in most cases, super is your biggest asset. And when I say that, a lot of people go, oh, no, my home's my biggest asset. Well, you can't eat your home. And so it really isn't an asset. Yes, you definitely need to be debt-free by the time you're retired. So that's a number one goal. But it's not an asset. What is in most people's cases, in most of my clients' cases, their super is their biggest asset. And so when I ask them, so do you know where your super is, or how did you choose that super fund, or have you contributed anything into your super lately? That's probably one of the most interesting conversations to just get you thinking about, well, why am I in Hester, or how did I end up in Australian super or whatever? Because it's important, because it's your biggest biggest asset. So let's break out for only 5 minutes. Let's go a quick conversation here, Leanne, because I've got only half an hour and I want to make sure I get through shares and property.
On to it. They're all opening up right now.
Cool. So, in the group we had someone who had, had their super since they were 16 and just never really moved. And then one particular person had it just based on the work environment. They both have put extra money or are concentrating on their super. So that was really good to know. Any conversations happen in the other room that were interesting that you want to share? No, okay, rightio. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get into shares and property. So let me just work this share button out. Okay, so what we're talking about here is the way I like to think about shares in property is based on why they do what they do, and then take it back to goals. So I'm going to just give you a quick example. If you bought an investment property and one of your goals was sending your kids to private schools, you can't break a bathroom off to send them to a private school. Like, you have to sell the whole house. So that's where it all comes back to the goals. Whereas maybe shares is something where, you know, like it creates an income, but also I could sell some of them if I needed a lump sum, like to go on a holiday or something like that. So when you think about what asset, you need to think about what it's for. Just the same as super, it's what is it for, and therefore is it going to work for me? Personally, I love both. I'm a big fan of property. Obviously, the property market is a bit out of control at the moment. I'm a huge fan of the share market, and personally, I believe on a long-term scale, they both go up roughly the same amount. Now, some people who are property gurus will say property goes up more, and the opposite is the same. So some people who are just solely share enthusiasts say share market goes up more. Really, they both go up the same. You've just got to obviously choose a really good quality property. You can't just go out and choose something randomly. And with the share market, though, you've got to be diversified. So there are the restraints around that statement. So then what I look at is how come they do what they do, and what makes them different, and therefore what do I use them for? So the volatility in the share market, I feel the share market is like a crazy lunatic. It's going up and down every day. Trump will tweet something and the market will like it or won't like it, and the market will go in a different direction. They'll have a result out on a company that meets expectation, but the property that company will go down, and it really is very, very crazy. Whereas I look at property more like a slow moving elephant. It takes a long time to get to its peak, 2 or 3 years, and then it takes a long time to get down to its bear market, its lowest point, and then it will start that process again. There are a couple of reasons for that difference in volatility, from being up and down every day like a yo-yo to this long stretch of going up and this slow downward slope. One of them is the cost to buy and sell. So when you buy in the share market, it can cost as little as $30, and as little to sell as $30. Whereas property, you've got the stamp duty, agency fees, you've got some repairs and maintenance about making the property look a little bit better. You may do some styling. And so therefore the cost to buy and sell is a lot more, and in turn then you're going to take longer to make that decision. You're not going to wake up one day and say, oh, my area is going down, I better put my property on the market because I don't want to, I want to make some money, I don't want to lose money. You won't do that. You'll actually take some time to think about it. You might do some repairs, you might the costs associated will be that you will take your time. Also in bad markets, so when there's economic downturn, even if you've lost your job, you will hold on to your home for as long as humanly possible, and that has an effect on the market taking a while to unwind. Whereas you hear of Rio blowing up a cave and the market will just sell those shares, and you can sell those shares in 1 second. So the other area is this how quick it is to get in and how quick it is to get out. That also plays on the volatility. So the share market you can do in 1 second. So you can literally buy shares and own them in 1 second, and you can sell them in 1 second and get the money in 3 days. So that is just, you can make decisions so much quicker than the property market. So with property, for example, you've got to find an agent, you've got to do repairs, you've got to put it on the market. And even if somebody buys it that first day, you won't get your money for 6 weeks. So that again has the effect of the volatility. So, and it creates a different market. It doesn't mean one is better than the other. It just is a different market. So you've got cost of getting in and out and the time of getting in and out that really plays into that volatility. Then what you go is, okay, so which one is better for what? And I see property as a growth asset, not because it grows faster than shares, but because of the leverage. So when you buy a property, you're not going to buy a $500,000 property and put $500,000 on that property. You're going to borrow to invest, and say you decide you're going to put $100,000 on because that's 20%. You now own an asset that's worth $500,000, but you've only paid $100,000. So if that asset goes up by 10%, you've made $50,000, even though you've only put $100,000 onto that property. And so when you think about property, you need to think of it as a growth asset because of that leverage. And so when you think about buying an investment property, you therefore need to think about the location. You need to make sure you get advice around it, because if you get it wrong, it's not going to do what it's made for, which is grow and go up in value, and because of that leverage. Now, if you think about you've got a $500,000 asset. If you make a mistake, then you've made a mistake on a $500,000 asset. So it's really, really important. So it's quite interesting that people are flippant about buying investment properties. They don't, they may do some research or read a book, but they don't go and get an advisor to help them, even though they're spending $500,000 on that property. Right now, it would be probably $1 million. Whereas shares still has a great growth record, long-term, same results, but you wouldn't leverage that amount. So you would buy, if you had $100,000, you would only buy $100,000 worth of shares. There's very few people that leverage into the share market, and I certainly don't recommend it. And so if that $100,000 goes up by 10%, you're only going up by $10,000. So you can see now that property is a growth asset, and it's because of the leverage, not because of, the magic of property and the Australian market and everything like that. It really does come down to that ability to buy a bigger asset because of the lending. Now, there is spruikers out there that talk about property being an income asset. I've done the maths 1,000,000 times. It's not possible for it to be an income asset even if you pay off the mortgage. So you bought that $500,000 property, you pay off the mortgage in 10 years. The rental yield on average sits at around 4.5%. But then you've got management fees, you've got rates, you've got water, you've got vacancy, you've also got repairs, and as that property gets older, you're going to have bigger and bigger repairs. So on average, when you take all of that into consideration over the lifetime of a 20-year property cycle, your yield's only sitting at 2.5%. And so it really needs to, when you're thinking about property, you need to think of it as a growth asset. You need to think of it for long term, and you need to think, so I therefore want it for things in the future, not something like 5 years from now, where you need to go on a big holiday or anything like that. You need to think about 10, 20 years. I'm just going to take a sip of water. Now, shares, on the other hand, super great growth asset, but they also create a better yield because you're not having expenses. So with the share, you know, if you bought Westpac, for example, that's going to give you a yield of, including franking credits, 6.5%. You don't have to pay any agency fees. You don't have to pay for them to change their logo color. There's no costs associated with renovations or repairs or maintenance or rates or anything like that. And so in turn, then from an income point of view, you're virtually going to get what the dividend is. So that makes it a bit more of an income generating asset because of that. So if you're thinking about what goals you want to do and you're thinking about, so where should I put my money? If you need it for income, then that's where you're going to get a better outcome. You can also sell a little bit. Unlike property, you can't sell that bathroom, you can't sell the pool, you can't sell, one bedroom. You have to sell the whole house, and then you have to realize the whole gain on that whole house and pay tax on it. Whereas the share market, you can just sell 10 grand. And you may have made only $1,000 gain on that particular parcel of shares. And so in turn, then it's a better, not necessarily advocating for short-term buying and selling, but it's better for those short to medium-term goals because you can sell. It's also that risk associated with it that it's not all one eggs in one basket. That's the other area when you're looking at comparing property and shares. So when I summarize this, the volatility is different in shares than property. And the reasons are really just logical, like it's because of the cost to buy and sell and the time it takes to get your money in and the time it takes to get your money out. Property from a leverage point of view makes it a better asset for growth, but it certainly doesn't mean it grows faster than shares. It's just that leverage component that gives it that thing. When you do the maths, and I advise you all to do the maths, especially if you're thinking of property for income, it really doesn't get that yield because of all the expenses. But that share portfolio is able to give you a bit more of a yield based on the fact that you don't have those costs associated with it. Before I go into, some little things about shares and property, does anybody have any questions in regards to that? You're all very, very quiet, but that's okay because I do tell you a lot of information. So hopefully I give you the information. So what I want to talk about here is how do you choose shares? And there is an array of different things. But first of all, you've got to think about the macro and microeconomics of the whole economies in the world. And so let's think about what's going on in the world at the moment. There's inflation concerns, there's stagflation, there's interest rates, there's different prime minister presidents coming into play, there's wars going on, and so all of that is taken into consideration in the world equity markets. You then think about, okay, so we understand that. So then what do we do? So and then there's different countries that are doing different things, like Japan has just increased interest rates. It's coming out of stagflation for the first time in 20 years. It's just extraordinary. But then you've got different industries. So you can have healthcare and you can have banks and you can have mining, you can have the tech industry. So there's different industries. And then within those different industries, there are different companies. So you can have Rio, or you can have BHP, or you can have Telstra, or you can have Netflix, or you can have, I don't know, Ozempic, so there's basically all these different companies within the different industries, within the different countries, throughout the whole world. So there are professionals that make decisions on that micro level. So they pick and choose companies, and they're professionals and they've done huge amounts of qualifications, and they spend their whole life in front of a computer choosing companies to invest in based on the criteria. I am not one of those people. I traded the market. I now don't trade the market. I just invest. And the best way is that diversification. So how do you diversify? There's a number of ways. you can go into fund managers, or you can go into exchange traded funds or indexes. Fund managers are those professionals where they're there making decisions on which companies they believe are going to perform better. So fund managers, you pay them a little bit extra, and then the idea is that they outperform the index or the exchange traded fund. So the index is when you hear people talk about, just one moment. Sorry, guys, that's not going to go away, that little cough. So I'm just going to have a little cough lolly. So a fund manager is a professional, and then an index is a computer algorithm. So when you hear on the news, the ASX 200, lost $1 billion, that is the top 200 shares in the Australian market. And if you bought into that index, you would own a small proportion of every single solitary share in the top 200. And if 200 Telstra perform badly and drop down to 201, it would automatically be removed from your index, and 201 would come up into your portfolio. So that's how exchange traded funds or indexes work. So they're one of the two. One is indexes is a fund, and exchange traded fund is like buying direct on the share market. So they just like to make it more confusing than it is. For indexes, you can buy anything. You can buy pigs. You can buy different currencies. You can buy gold. You can buy the NASDAQ. You can buy an index in Germany of the small caps. So you can buy any single solitary index. The benefit is it's cheap because it's not a person. And it will diversify you because it won't be just one company. The disadvantages are that there's some things that just don't perform. So they may not go up as well in comparison to a fund manager. For example, small caps, like if you think about the smallest companies in the whole world, not just Australia, these minute little micro companies that are on the stock market, if you bought, the top 100 of those companies, you may find that you've got quite a lot of those companies that aren't going to go anywhere, that are probably going to fail, and etc. Whereas maybe a fund manager has done a little bit more due diligence in the economy and the companies, and now understands these particular small companies throughout the world are better. So exchange traded funds or indexes have its advantages in regards to it's cheap and diversified. Fund managers also have their advantages in regards to they've got this professional qualification that they're learning about. But the most important thing is diversification. How you could get into the share market is what's called dollar cost averaging. Oh, somebody's got a question.
Can I just ask? Sorry, it's Ingrid. Thanks, Katie. You could have a mix, right? So could you have a fund manager and also do index?
Definitely. And that's a really good question, because that's the way I like to run it.
Yeah.
I feel that there are some fund managers that are just going to outperform, not necessarily because they're amazing. It's because that particular area works better for fund managers. And then indexes are really great to get that diversification out there, but a combination of two works really well.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. One of the areas that I think, and again, I'm not giving anybody advice, but I think it works well is in the fixed interest space and the bond space, because they're different durations, and indexes are just not as flexible. And so whereas fund managers understand that market and can really make a big difference. But again, I believe it's the same with that small caps or emerging markets. You need that person there that has more insights into individual companies to make that decision rather than a big blanketed approach. But how the best way to get into the market, like, is not to get that 10 grand and just buy. It's maybe to dollar cost average into it, very similar to the way super is run right now. So every month you put money into super and it's purchased. That would be the same way you could do the share market. So maybe look at some indexes and some fund managers and just slowly over time putting money in on a monthly basis, regardless of what the market is doing. Because the market is always going to change, and it's always, there's anytime you turn on the news, they're going to tell you something bad that is going on in the market, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be there forever. And we certainly know that, like, I think last week was the worst week in 2 years in the US stock market, and then yesterday was the best day in the last 6 months. So they're always sprouting these crazy statistics. And so you're never going to do anything if you're waiting for it to be better. So that is the way you look at the equity market. And so the way I think about property is, first of all, what type of property? So you've got residential and commercial. Commercial gives you a higher yield, but it has, and the reason it does that is because it's greater risk, because you may be vacant for long periods of time, regardless of how low you reduce your rent by. Whereas residential gives you a lower yield, but it's less risky because you can drop your rent by $50, $20, $100, and eventually somebody will rent it. So right now that obviously isn't the case, but that's the reason why the yields are so different. So the commercial property just has that, you get that little bit of bump in the yield because there's this risk. There may be years where you don't have anybody in there. There's a market cycle. So right at the moment, every state has a different cycle and they're in a different part of the cycle. But from everything I'm reading, Perth is still in this upwards trajectory. So we're still in a bull market. It will get to an area where it's, you know, at its peak, and we'll only know that in hindsight because of the statistics. There's a lag in knowing when you're at your peak and when you're at your the upward momentum. You'll look back on that and go, oh, wow, that March was the peak of the property market, as an example. And then you'll go into a slow downward cycle. Now, it all depends on the suburbs. Some suburbs just stay stagnant, so they don't actually go down. They just don't go anywhere for a long period of time. And some suburbs just crash. And it does have a lot to do with location, and it has a lot to do with employment. And the amount of investors there are versus the amount of homeowners. So remember when I talked about, even if you've lost your job, you're going to hold on for dear life. If you've got an investment property and you've lost your job, you're going to sell that investment property. So, you know, that then determines sometimes how quickly the market will drop away. Now, I wasn't here in Perth. I just came after the big downturn that you guys had the last time the mining boom crashed. And some areas that just went disastrous was because that had a lot of FIFO workers that came over here specifically for mining, and then they just departed as soon as they lost their jobs. So they went back to New Zealand, back to the eastern states, and those areas just went down, and significantly down, and then other areas just hung out and just didn't go anywhere. So whenever I'm thinking about buying an investment property, I'm thinking about an exit strategy. Because it's such a big asset, I'm never going in thinking that I'm going to hold this for 20 years and I don't have to worry about it. I'm thinking, what if something happens? How am I going to get out? And so when I think about investment properties and an exit strategy, I want to take an average. Right? So I want to go, okay, so within Perth, the average property price, say, is, I don't know, like I'm making this up, so don't quote me on this, say $700,000. So I'm not going to go and buy a $1.5 million investment property because less people are going to be able to afford it if I need to sell. If I need to get out for whatever reason, I'm going to have less people looking at that property than the average of 750. So you want to think about when you're buying an investment property, okay, what happens if I have to sell? I want more people able to afford to buy this property, not less people. So I want to make sure I'm within that average. You definitely want to look at location and growth, not income, and take that into consideration, and long-term growth. So some of those areas that didn't do well in the last mining collapse, they're going to do that again. That's going to happen again and again and again as we go through these booms and crashes. And so you may not want to be there, or you want to at least understand why it happened there and will it happen again. The last question I get asked all the time is, how many do I need? Now, when I started my property craziness, I don't know where I read this, but somebody said I needed 10 properties, and supposedly you can retire on 10 properties. Mathematically, I find that really difficult because you have to sell them in order to release any income in order to retire. But it all depends on what your goals are and what you want to try and achieve. You don't want to get yourself in a sticky situation where you have to sell because you're over leveraged. So you need to take that into consideration. And the other thing you need to take into consideration is this negative gearing thing that's going on, because you're getting money back from the government because you're not making any money. So it's not because you're amazing. It's just technically that's just what's happened. You're making less money than your income, than the property is generating. So you want to make sure it's a good property. And so you don't want to get yourself into a position where you're so leveraged that you don't have any money and you're eating baked beans. You could do that if you're younger, because that's what we did. But then when you get older, you don't want to be in that position. So it's really based on what you can do. But let me tell you, you don't need as many as you think you do. Because of that growth asset. Now I'm looking at the time. I've spoken for a long time. It's now 2 minutes to 7. I'm going to stop and I'm going to see if anybody has any questions. Go for it. Somebody ask a question.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stop the recording now and thank everyone for joining us. So any questions that are asked now will be away from the recording and you can open up the floor completely. Thank you for joining the Business Women Australia Masterclass. We hope today's session has provided you with actionable insights and strategies to empower your personal and professional growth. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe to stay informed about future masterclasses and content. If you're not already a member of Business Women Australia, what are you waiting for? Head to our website today and join. Become part of a dynamic network of business leaders and gain access to exclusive resources, events, and opportunities to elevate your career. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in our next masterclass.